Om. 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 Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukham Apnuyat. Om Shanti Shanti शांति। आशा है कि ईश्वर की कृपा से हम इस कार्यक्रम द्वारा सर्वश्रेष्ठ ज्ञान पाएंगे। नमस्ते।
Namaste to everybody.
Namaste.
And welcome to this lecture on the series Back to the Vedas. I'm Karuna Mohan, and I'm working in the Ved Niketan, which is an arm of the Arya Prathinidhi Sabha that attends to publications, publicity, and public lectures and graded examinations in Hinduism. I was appointed to moderate this year's lectures to enable us to consolidate the outcomes and share them widely. This year, we commemorate 100 years in the Arya Prathinidhi Sabha, and in the Back to the Veda lectures, all our lectures are focusing on replacing the need for a conference, a physical conference, that is. Our first three lectures were in February, March, and April, and they covered the past of the Arya Samaj. The first lecture was delivered by Professor Ghulam Wahed, a leading historian, who explained the context from the arrival of Indians in South Africa to the formation of the APS in 1925. Our second lecture was delivered by Professor Brij Maharaj, a geographer who took the discussions further and shared details of the APS, its formation, as well as the Arya Samajas in other parts of the world. Our third lecture was delivered by Hiralal Pai, who is with us today, and he shared memories and his personal observations of the caliber of leaders of the past of the Arya Samaj. And he used the prism of building the Vedic mandirs in the country to do that. Ghulam Bhai's lectures is published in the Ved Jyoti, our April issue, which is available on the website. And Brij Pai and Hiralal Pai's lectures will be published in the forthcoming June issue of the Ved Jyoti, which will also be accessible on the website from the 1st of June. Our next 4 lectures in the series are going to be covering the past, present, and future by looking at what does it mean to be a member of the Arya Samaj. And in these 4 lectures, we'll be focusing on climate justice, the struggle for liberation in South Africa, social work in the Arya Samaj with the Aryan Benevolent Home, and inequalities and the identity crisis we face today. These 4 lectures are really about how we manage our current challenges. And hopefully, Kiran, from these discussions, we'll probably get some very good ideas of what we should be doing in the Arya Samaj going forward for the next 100 years. The Arya Samaj has instituted a project called Project Tripti, which works on water scarcity, and it builds social cohesion in different communities. Wherever there are boreholes, there's also food gardens at these schools. We have a number of food centers where there are food gardens, including the Narayan Jeevan Vedic Center, where Swami Maitri has been very involved in really getting on with the seed bank and working towards ensuring that the neighboring community is linked into the food garden itself. And we, this year, actually no, last year, we started a new project on planting trees, which hopefully will help us to build awareness in the communities about zero carbon programs. Now, all of these programs in the Arya Samaj need to be consolidated so that it could have an impact on climate justice and to ensure that the Arya Samaj is tackling the most urgent issues facing humanity in the 21st century. And in today's lecture, this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at climate change. And for this, we have Vishwas Satgar, who is here with us. And Vishwas is based in Johannesburg, a very, very cold Johannesburg. Vishwas is a professor of international relations at the University of Witwatersrand. Vish, I think this is the first time you're having a session with us this year in the Arya Samaj. Is that correct? Yes. So I'd like to take the opportunity on behalf of the Arya Samaj to congratulate you on being conferred full professorship at the University of Witwatersrand. I know it's quite a big achievement. I'm very proud of you, and I'm sure everybody else in the Arya Samaj is equally proud of the achievement that you've got now. Vish co-founded the Climate Justice Charter Process and Movement. He edits Democratic Marxism series and leads the Emancipatory Future Studies in the Anthropocene Project. Now, the Anthropocene Project is about the impact human activity has on the planet and a lot more, which I'm sure Vishwas is going to try and condense and tell you about. He also co-founded the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and an organization called COPAC that works on all of these projects as well as cooperatives. Vish has broken a lot of barriers in society and particularly at the university, which I would call the ivory tower. He has engaged with communities, workers, activists, and has made academia and intellectual thinking more accessible. So today what he's going to do is share his views with us on climate justice, and in particular, why we all need to act now and what can we do. Over to you, Vish.
Okay, well, good evening to everybody, and thank you to the Arya Samaj and Karuna for this opportunity to engage you on 2 very fundamental questions, why we need to act now on climate change and what can we do. 100 years may not be adequate, Karuna, in terms of a time horizon. We're dealing with a 300-year problem here. And but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't start now. So I'm going to answer the first part of this question in relation to the themes in red. I'm going to try and walk you all through the science of the climate crisis and its urgencies, climate risk in Southern Africa, climate crisis and the planetary polit crisis. So we're not dealing with a crisis in the singular. There's a whole set of crises cascading and interconnecting, and they're feeding off each other. And you need to understand that. We also have to understand the racism of climate injustice, the new climate apartheid that's working itself through the world, particularly as the global north fails to address a problem that it has largely created. And then I want to kind of just give you insights into climate injustice in South Africa as it relates to harms that have been impacting on humans. And then, of course, harms against more than human life. I just pulled out a few photographs from a 10-year project I've been busy with, which is documenting climate extremes in South Africa. And that will come out as a separate book project probably next year. And then the second half of this talk will be about what we can do together. So how do we stand united for climate justice? How does climate justice relate to transformative politics? Now, it can be very overwhelming talking about a big planetary problem, but there is a politics that can meet this challenge. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, locating climate justice politics is what I call post-normal politics. This is very, very important. And I'll explain what this means just now. And then, of course, how we start working from below in our communities, in our households, in our workplaces to start tackling this problem. And then finally, posing some questions for the Arya Samaj. So here goes. So the climate problem relates to a rupture in the Earth's system. Now, climate scientists talk about the end of an epoch called the Holocene. Because of this rupture in the Earth system, because of using for over 150 years coal, oil, and gas, we are suddenly changing the planetary conditions that we are living in. The state of the planet is changing as we impact its climate system. And as a result, the Earth is responding. So in other words, humans are changing not just the state of the planet, but also the history of the planet. And this is a very, very important point I want to drive home today. This is about the magnitude of the problem. It's a planetary scale problem, very important. The other point to make is that as we overshoot planetary scale temperature, and in 2015, we started living on a new planet. Most people haven't internalized this, but in 2015, we overshot a 1 degree Celsius increase in planetary temperature since the Industrial Revolution. So in other words, we heated the planet by 1 degree Celsius more since then. Now that might sound very small, that might sound like a very marginal change, but actually it magnifies and ramifies on an Earth scale in very, very serious ways. And as we leave behind 11,000 years of a relatively stable climate, we are now entering uncharted territory for this planet. And I'll be reinforcing this point with one or two other slides as well. These are the big takeaways for tonight. So at the same time, as we've overshot this 1 degree Celsius since the Industrial Revolution, we are now beginning to live climate extremes. So 20 years ago, when I was doing this kind of activism and work, it was very, very hard to make the case for taking the climate problem seriously because it was seen as a scientific problem and scientists will solve this problem and so on. But actually, climate science, while it has been brilliant and important, climate scientists have not been able to convince publics to deal with this problem. But we'll talk about that just now. So we are living climate extremes. We are living floods. We are living droughts. We are living heat waves. We are living cyclones, etc. And they are it's not as though we haven't had these things before, but there is increasingly scientific evidence that can attribute the intensity, the extremes in which these weather events express themselves directly to climate change. So there's very good science that is making these connections for us. So again, these are not just commonplace natural disasters. These are linked directly to using and burning coal, oil, and gas. And there's 6 cycles of science that we have now in the International Panel on Climate Change that is making these points, the best climate science we have in the world. We are also now seeing dangerous tipping points flashing. In other words, as we are rupturing the Earth's system because of oil, coal, and gas, there are, if you like, signals or very important canaries in the mind that are telling us how bad this problem is becoming. They are called tipping points. And I'll say more about many of the themes on this slide as we proceed this evening. So the climate crisis is the worst threat we face as a species because it has the potential to bring about our extinction, to change the planetary conditions that sustain life. Now, planet Earth is the only planet that we know of that has this kind of life condition. There's no other case study, if you like, despite all the scientific exploration and space travel and deep probes and so on. This is the one planet in this solar system and in the universe that really proliferates life. It enables life. But with the climate crisis, we are actually undermining that process, okay? So as I said, we overshot 1 degree Celsius in 2015 and we started living on a new planet. And you could see consistently in the science that the carbon concentration in the atmosphere, and they started keeping these measurements since the 1960s, and you can see we are now at 327 parts per million carbon concentration. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, it was actually 250 parts per million carbon concentration. So there's a major jump, and we are close to a doubling of the carbon concentration on a planetary scale. We are very likely to overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius this decade. The current science, and today I was reading some of that, basically says that over the past 2 years, we've already had a temporary overshoot of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, again, 1.5 degrees might seem, well, this is marginal, inconsequential, small number, etc. But think about this at a planetary scale. This is the entire climate system. And this shift is impacting all kinds of patterns and variables and so on inside this climate system. In other words, a hotter world is having some serious impacts. We are seeing the extreme weather shocks, as I've mentioned, and they're beginning to register in very, very serious ways. We also know that the rich industrialized countries have been responsible for this problem. There's a history here. And the US historically has had the highest emissions, and it has the highest per capita emissions in the world. China's emissions have been going up at least over the past 3 decades, but they do not have the same historical emissions as the United States. Their per capita emissions are equivalent to that of the average European, not the average American. South Africa has also been responsible for climate change. We've used coal for over 100 years, and we are the 11th highest emitter of carbon. So let's bring all of what I've said together, hopefully in very simple, accessible ways. So if you look at this graphic, this visual, you'll see that all the countries in red and kind of almost, I don't know, it's like a darker red here. These are the countries responsible for carbon emissions on our planet. They've used up the share of our carbon budget the most, basically. So South Africa is also in red here. Australia, of course, the US is the front runner, etc. But it's interesting to see Africa. Now, most of Africa is not really responsible. There's no overshoot, the green, you can see it here. So African countries, the per capita emissions is like 0.2 or something. So Africa in general, with the exception of South Africa, has not been responsible for the climate rupture. Now, as I've been saying, this problem is a planetary problem. And to illustrate it to you, this little graphic tells you that story and brings it all together. So basically, for 11,000 years, we've been living in an epoch called the Holocene on this planet, sometimes referred to as the Edenic condition, because these were the conditions that enabled life to thrive. We established sedentary communities, built civilizations and cities. We developed complex societies with divisions of labor, philosophy, maths, culture, writing. All of those things happened in this 11,000-year period, agriculture and so on. But we are leaving this 11,000-year Holocene period behind, and we are going into this no analog state. In other words, an uncharted place. So we've had climate variability over this 11,000 years, but this 11,000 years of climate variability has been, if you like, still manageable and livable. We could build the things we needed to build as a species and to thrive and to flourish. But what's coming now is this big question, okay? What comes next as we change the Earth's climate system and as the Earth responds to us? This is a big question, and it's at the heart of the climate challenge. So as I've been talking about tipping points, just to help you understand this, and again, this is where the cutting edge science is. So if you look at there's about 15 major tipping points, these canaries in the mine. So as we use more coal, oil, and gas, we extract it and we burn it and we use it in our industries, in our cars, in our food systems, etc. These tipping points start flashing. So between 1 and 3 degrees Celsius, you'll see these yellow ones. The Greenland ice sheet, the Arctic summer ice, the alpine glaciers, the coral reefs, the Western Antarctic ice sheet. These tipping points are flashing the brightest at the moment. So we've lost 50% of the coral reefs in Australia already. In the Western Antarctic, there's massive movements going on in terms of the ice shelf, icebergs breaking up, etc. And this is going to impact sea level rise. We are seeing here in the Arctic also the ice sheet recede, and it's releasing methane, which is the deadliest of all the greenhouse gases and so on. Same in Greenland and so on, okay? So these tipping points are flashing very bright at the moment. And as we continue to use oil, coal, and gas, and as temperatures increase, these orange ones are also going to start flashing, and they are going to start showing changes in the climate, in the Earth's climate system. Over 5 degrees Celsius, these kind of pinky red ones are also going to be showing serious shifts and changes. So climate scientists use these tipping points as signals to warn us, to tell us as societies, listen, if we continue using oil, coal, and gas, again, we are shifting dynamics on the planet, and some of these dynamics will become irreversible changes that will become locked in. So the longer we delay change around this climate problem, and we have had negotiations for 3 decades, and we've had a crisis of leadership and a failure of leadership. But that doesn't mean that all's said and done. I'll come back to what we need to do. So transitioning from the big picture and the global picture now to Southern Africa. So what you have in front of you is basically telling us that as temperatures increase over time from 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, basically Southern Africa is going to become a very, very hot place. Okay, it's obvious, it's logical. You heat the planet, and basically you're going to have greater heat. So Southern Africa is heating at twice the global average. We are one of 10 hotspots in the world. This is according to our own climate scientists. So when the world increases by 1.5, we will be at 3 degrees Celsius. We are heating at twice the global average. So we will be hotter than most places on the planet, okay? So again, this is another reason why we have to take this problem very, very seriously. So beyond just the bigger picture, science and the and the urgency is there, and the lights and the signals that are flashing, we also have serious immediate risks in our region. So this set of diagrams and visuals basically tell you that over time, besides heat, we are going to become a drier part of the planet, okay? So basically in this century, by 2021 to 2040, we'll already see dryness. We have a 3-year drought cycle. Our last drought was actually 7 years. It was apparently one of the longest droughts in our history in the 20th century. Our dams can only handle droughts for about 5 years in this country. So our droughts are going to get worse. It's going to get drier and drier and drier with more climate change. So basically, if you follow that, and it's very simple, the more things heat, you move from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 degrees in our region and on a planetary scale. Well, what gets impacted first? Our food systems, okay? So at 3 degrees Celsius, which is around the corner for us in the next decade, when the world overshoots 1.5, we'll be at 3. Well, most of our livestock cannot handle it. Most of our cereals and grains cannot handle it at 3 degrees. So our food systems will take a massive hit. Our water systems, already compromised by failing states, etc., governance droughts, are also going to take a hit. Our ecosystems, biodiversity, etc., is already taking a hit and is going to take more of a hit. And then, of course, extreme weather events will become way more pronounced and more intense and so on. So droughts, instead of being 3 years, will probably be 10 years, etc., etc. Rainfall, which normally would be spread out over a season, you'll have almost 1 year of rainfall in a matter of hours. It's already begun. But these are the kind of shifts, and these are going to be some of the impacts in our region and in our country. So basically, the climate crisis is a crisis that is endangering everything, but it is also implicated in exacerbating, making worse other crisis dynamics on the planet, okay? So for instance, as we heat more and more, we are facing the risk of climate famine. So in other words, the heating of the planet and climate crisis will impact our food systems. So that feeds into another problem. So it's interconnected with another problem. This is why it's a complex problem. The costs of climate shocks are increasing as a percentage of gross domestic product. So in 2024, the cost of damages on the planet from cyclones and droughts, etc., flooding was $300 billion. That was the price tag on this, right? Now imagine South Africa's budget and GDP is smaller than this, okay? So imagine South Africa gets hit by floods, droughts, heat waves, etc., all at once. And we're starting to see this pattern more and more. Well, what that means is that the costs of climate change are going to go up and up and up. So this all adds up to the threat and the risk of insolvency of states, okay? So Africa and the global south is facing loss and damages of at least over $1 trillion after 2030. So the more the planet heats and the more we go towards 1.5, and further overshoot, the costs to African societies in the global south is going to become immense, okay? And so a serious climate debt and loss and damages will be owed by the global north to us. It is estimated the world needs about $50 trillion to make the transition beyond a carbon-centric way of life. And about 200 million Africans will be displaced by the end of the decade. So here again is another reason why you need to take this climate crisis very, very seriously, okay? So it's a polycrisis, as I've been saying. The climate crisis impacts, so the more unequal your society, like ours, we are a poster nation for inequality. Climate shocks will impact the poor and the most vulnerable the hardest, okay? That's the disproportionality. That's where the injustice is going to be. So the rich people can buy air conditioning systems when there's heat. They can buy water when there's drought, and they can sink boreholes and so on. But poor people can't do that. And we saw that during the drought in South Africa. Many, many people, day zero in Cape Town, were queuing up at the springs in and around Cape Town to get water. Biodiversity loss is a major problem, and as things heat up, we're going to be losing more and more of our wildlife on planet Earth. In the 20th century, we lost 50% of wildlife on planet Earth. Resources are also limited. And so if you want to reproduce the American way of life and just have one electric vehicle per household, there's not going to be enough resources on planet Earth. Okay, so there's already resource peak, and we've got to factor in these serious constraints. I mentioned food crises. The food system itself contributes about 40% of global emissions. It controls a large percentage of the allocation of water resources on the planet. And so basically, while contributing to climate, the climate crisis will also impact the food systems we have, and so on. But we're also seeing the securitization and the criminalization of democracies that serve the rich and corporations. So all these dynamics. So Donald Trump is not interested in addressing the climate crisis. He's an elitist. He's serving the interests of petro interests and fossil fuel interests. And so basically, they are all pushing us towards societal collapse. There's a neo-fascism on the rise in the world. It's becoming the new politics of the ruling classes and imperial force. In other words, they can't manage all these crises coming together at one time. And so they are going to securitize the problem. They are going to militarize the problem. And today I was reading something that said, together with war, weather impacts are some of the most damaging for society. So we're going to be squeezed between authoritarian leadership on the one side, and on the other side, increasing climate extremes, okay? So to transition then from that point about polycrisis as a reason for you to take this problem seriously is climate apartheid. And to cut a long story short, I've just got a number of countries here where you can see poorer countries getting hit the hardest. In KwaZulu-Natal, in April, I think, of 2022, 500 people were killed, over 17 billion rand in infrastructure damage. Most people don't talk about it, but the first climate famine, and I'm busy working on this, I'll be going to Madagascar later this year, was in Madagascar in 2021. 1 million people were impacted. Again, it never made headline news anywhere in the world. Madagascar is one of the poorest, most poverty-stricken, and also one of the most dangerous countries in the world because of poverty and so on. We've seen floods in Nigeria. We've seen 4-year droughts in the Horn of Africa, 22 million people starving. We've now had the hottest years on record, and we've had food emergencies declared in Zambia and Zimbabwe between 2023 and 2024. And as I've been saying, 200 million Africans are facing climate displacements. Now, these stories don't come together in the media for us. They don't tell us about the injustices that are going on, particularly against the poorest countries that have not created this problem. And this is climate apartheid. This is the face of climate injustice. So Africa is bearing the brunt also of the climate problem, some of the poorest, highly indebted countries, about 26 of them in this continent. But what's happening? When Russia invaded Ukraine, a lot of investment flowed into oil and gas extraction sites on our continent. Our president and Gwede Mantashe, the Minister of Energy, are so excited about giving licenses for coast-to-coast offshore oil and gas extraction. They have about 29 licenses already in the pipeline. We probably will have about 49. Imagine massive blasting and air guns and so on used here for exploration, and what that's going to do to our marine and aquatic ecosystems. Just disastrous. So climate apartheid is not just about humans. Climate apartheid is also about more than humans. So I just want to quickly just give you another reason why you need to take this problem very seriously. As I've been saying, it's now part of lived reality. I've been documenting this for 10 years now. This is our drought. This picture here is in Lanesburg in the Western Cape, very small town. But, you know, it wasn't just Cape Town impacted by day zero. I traveled crisscross the country And I found that many, many small towns and villages were also experiencing day zeros. And they were very, very in a water-stressed condition. This is what happened in Amshloti. And basically, climate change is a great leveler. You might think you're rich and you're living in a fancy neighborhood, but what happened here in April 2022? Well, when the rain bomb came, it literally wrenched a big part of this building off this hill, basically. 500 people or died, as you know. Now, this is a school in Moy River, and they've had a massive flood. And this is a teacher looking at the books drying, basically, because the state didn't provide any support. These teachers had to try and keep the learning project going. And so they were just trying to hold it all together. Okay. Now, this is a river that was flooded in the bit on the border with the Northern Cape in a little village called Lutzville. This is a child trying to cross this river. Now, remember, when heavy rains come upriver, people experience the floods downriver. So this child couldn't cross this river at this point in time. So this is, again, the harms that climate change is bringing to our society, and this is going to get worse and worse. So this is also the harms that come also to more than human life. And I have to stress this point to you all. So this is the Bushman's River in the Eastern Cape. It was bone dry when I traveled there. It was the tail end of the drought. I think it was 2023 or something. And what was observed here, and this was a nature park, a reserve, was that the hippos were leaving these water ponds, etc. And the smaller hippos were getting kicked out of the herds by the dominant males and so on. And so they were being abandoned for predators, etc. Now, this was also threatening the reproduction of the species, okay? These are donkeys, and I love donkeys. And as I traveled the country during the drought, I found many, many abandoned donkeys and horses because farmers and rural communities couldn't afford to feed them during the drought, etc. So this was a donkey refuge that I visited. And it was fortunate that some of these donkeys were rescued, etc. So what do we do? I've given you reasons to take this problem very seriously. So what can we do together? Well, the first issue is standing together for climate justice. Climate justice is a principle that places the needs of the most vulnerable, human and non-human, at the center of climate politics. It is a principle that is embodied in the world's first climate justice charter, which we developed out of the droughts and which we took to Parliament. The Arya Samaj, as I understand it, is an endorsee of the climate justice charter. The charter has a pluri-vision for our society. What does pluri-vision mean? It means that we must address the legacies of apartheid, which the national liberation politics of this country failed to do. We must address the current crisis of the present, and we must secure a livable, just, and democratic future. That's what a pluri-vision means. And if you read this charter, it's basically a kind of compass for where we should be going together as a society to navigate the poly crisis, to confront the climate crisis and the intersecting crises so that we can secure a future, an intergenerational future. Climate politics is transformative politics. I'm not going to spend too much time around all of this, but just to say that for the past 3 decades, climate politics as transformative politics has been trying to defend the basis of life, and it's been trying to find exits from this big planetary challenge that we have. It's going to the root causes. That's what you must always keep in mind. I want you to just note one thing from this slide, this big word here, democratic systemic reforms. Transformative politics is about democratic systemic reforms. Now, what does this mean? Democratic means that we all have to be involved in solving this problem. And I'm going to be reinforcing this point. The elites have failed us in the multilateral process. In our own country, they have failed us. They're not serious about putting South Africa on a climate emergency footing. So we have to own the problem, and we have to also own the solutions. The solutions must be systemic. We must go to the root causes of problems. There's no low-hanging fruit. There's no cosmetic change. No, no, no. We are running out of time, and we've got to change our energy system. We've got to change our transport system. We have to change our food systems. We have to change our water systems to prepare for what's coming. These are reforms in the sense that we have to pass policies, adopt laws, we have to build institutions, and we have to ensure that rights and democracy drives all of this. So these are democratic systemic reforms, and they are central to climate justice politics. I'll make one final point around transformative politics that I don't want to get into all of it here tonight, but you are experiencing climate change in your communities, okay? So your experiential knowledge is very important for climate justice politics. You know your community, you've lived there. Tacit knowledge is about how we solve this problem, and we've been building up knowledge. The Climate Justice Charter is one example of how we start tackling this problem. But there are also policies we are developing, etc. And then there's emancipatory knowledge that also helps us. So Vedic thought, can Vedic thought occupy a branch on this tree that helps us think about the planetary crisis and so on? I'll come back to that. So basically, climate justice is transformative, but it is post-normal politics. To underline the point, we have to own the problem, society has to own the problem, and it has to own the solutions. And we do have solutions, okay? Our ruling elites are just not listening, because it means they have to confront their own vested interests and their lock-ins and so on. We can advance a just transition from below that ensures we adapt our society, we decarbonize our society, we regenerate our society, and we remake state-civil society relations. But we need a mass politics. This is my point. Without a mass politics, if we think a presidential climate commission is going to solve this problem, or a minister for the environment is going to solve this problem, or a president who loves offshore oil and gas is going to solve this problem, then sadly, ladies and gentlemen, you are mistaken. So we can now accelerate the deep, just transition from below. The Climate Justice Charter movement is working on a climate emergency policy platform. We've translated the 14 alternatives in the charter into policies that you can champion in your workplaces and in your communities. For example, we took a food sovereignty policy and a People's Food Sovereignty Act for South Africa to Parliament last year on World Food Day. It talks about the triple transition to a food sovereignty common system. How do we transition industrial agriculture? How do we transition small-scale neighborhood, community gardens and farming? How do we transition the ocean food system commons as well? The other big idea that we believe that is essential for climate justice politics is the idea of a climate emergency social contract. This embodies the plurivision of the Climate Justice Charter. It means that we need to mobilize all social forces in society. We need to give them this work with this common vision. We need to work with common purpose. We need to mobilize across sectors of society, move away from silos, and embrace this idea of a climate emergency. We are running out of time. So everything we have to do to prepare our society has to come to the fore, has to be a national priority. The idea of a climate justice deal is another very important thing. For 3 years, we've been rethinking macroeconomics. What would it mean to place our country on a climate emergency footing? How can this macroeconomics address the poly crisis, so zero waste? How can it bring care to the fore? And how can it bring solidarity to the fore in our economy? The economy we have is not interested in any of these things. It's wasteful, it is uncaring, and it is competitive and selfish and all about greed. We need a different kind of economy to face the challenges we are facing. And then finally, we need to have a different kind of international politics. We need a climate emergency bloc of vulnerable governments, peoples, movements, particularly on our continent. We shouldn't be in the BRICS, ladies and gentlemen. We should be rallying Africa right now around a climate justice deal for Africa. The West needs our minerals, but we need to be talking with one voice. We are experiencing climate shocks and extremes. We should be demanding a climate debt from the rich governments in the world, including China, by the way. So in short, there are several practical things we can do together. Some of us have been busy working on this as part of an emergent climate justice charter movement. But I want to end with these questions to the Arya Samaj. How do the principles of the Arya Samaj converge with climate justice? I think there's a lot of common ground. I'm a child of the Arya Samaj. 2 generations in my family have given their lives to the Arya Samaj, and that contributed to making me who I am in many ways. But in terms of where we are standing today in the world, in history, on this planet, we have to look at where the Arya Samaj stands and orientates around this principle of climate justice. I think the other quick question I think that's important for the Arya Samaj is, how does its Vedic socialism relate to the polycrisis of our time? What is the anti-racist, feminist, and ecological basis of Vedic socialism in the 21st century? And then 2 final questions. How can the Arya Samaj rally interfaith solidarity for climate justice? And finally, is there Arya Samaj, both as organizations and individuals, willing to contribute materially to this life and death struggle? See, ladies and gentlemen, we have to empower our communities. We have to train our community organizations to understand all of this. But as activists, as poor activists, we don't have resources, and maybe you could help us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vish. If you stop sharing screen, then we could open up. Thank you very much, Vish. Okay, that was like really powerful. A few people said it's a brilliant lecture. During the lecture, Shamim, you've got your hands raised. Please unmute.
Thanks, Karuna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Prof, thanks. That really was a superb presentation and hugely educational. So just 2 comments, and then I have a question specifically for you, Prof. Karuna, you started off by discussing Project Tripti, which is our borehole project. This has been ongoing, I think, for more than a decade. I'm not sure of the exact extent timeline there, but I was watching the Earthshot presentation. Prince William runs that particular organization. And one of the, there were 5 activists that were highlighted on that particular program, the documentary. So one of them was a Swiss professor, and his brief is to unite people that are working in climate activism throughout the world. So 4 years ago, he started off and he mapped this with the use of Google Maps and input from communities around the world. Started off with about 400 people, and he's now grown that networking to over 300,000 people throughout the world. So his brief in that particular program is connectivity of climate activists throughout the world. And I think Project Tripti can increase its reach and get much more involved with the international community. They just, I mean, we can explore the process. Earthshot is well represented on the internet. Exactly how to get in touch with the key role players. And so we can, I think we would be able to get quite a lot of assistance through that particular project. So, and I see Pandit Arti Shanand is part of this, has joined this group. I can assist you with that, Panditji, if you would like, just connecting to the people that may be of assistance. And then this is a direct question to Prof. So there's a big problem because the US really drives policy, is instrumental in driving global policy. And every 4 years they have an election, and then you have a huge change in policy. And we've just seen that transition between the Democrats, who had $1 trillion infrastructure bill, a large part of that directed towards climate change. And now you've got Trump, and you rightly said, moving towards autocratic government and big business, and climate change is really being neglected under his. And that's going to go on for the next 4 years. And there's going to be great destruction caused by his policies. So in Europe, where there's greater ownership around and change around climate policy, there was lots of grassroots activism and the formation of the so-called green parties that then became part of the coalition governments. And many of the role players in the Green Party became ministers of health and environment and were able to drive policies in Europe that I think made huge differences in terms of legislation. So my question to Prof is, until we have meaningful political representation in Parliament, we're not going to be able to pass statutory law in terms of legislation. So activism is good. We have scientists, we have data, we have educated people, but the reality is that the change needs to occur at government level. And where are we in South Africa with regards to that? So yeah, thanks, Karuna. That's
Thank you very much, Shamim. Are there any further questions, points?
There's a hand up, Karuna.
Yes, there is a hand up. It's Mr. Maraj or Miss Maraj. Please unmute and speak.
Sorry, Karuna, it's Brij Maharaj. I'm not sure what name you're seeing there. The university just reconfigured my laptop, so I don't know what you were seeing.
Maraj B.
Vishwas, it's Brij
Very
Maharaj.
secretive.
Congratulations on an amazing lecture.
Thank you.
You've explained some very difficult concepts in a way that a non-academic audience can understand, and not many of us can do that. But my comment is linked to that last slide you put about what the Arya Samaj can do. And I think we need to go beyond the Arya Samaj. You raised the issue of interfaith. And I wear many hats, so I think some of the colleagues know that. And I'm not representing any organization yet before someone goes and writes a letter to the Post about me from this audience. I think this is the Arya Samaj centenary year, and I think I speak to many of the Arya Samaj leaders and so on. We're all colleagues working in the same terrain. And I think before the year is out, there's an opportunity for the Arya Samaj to host a conference looking at climate change from the faith sector, and in terms of how we can educate, inform, transform, and also challenge the state. This is important because I think, listen, I'm also very critical of government at many levels, but I can tell you one thing. The government is prepared to listen. We have to engage. And at that conference, we can even bring in the other faiths. So I'm volunteering to assist the APS in doing this. And I think it will be a wonderful conclusion to his centenary year, because we are now wanting to chart. So in my lecture, I said, what happens for the next 100 years? So we can start talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that suggestion, Professor Brij Maharaj. We have a comment from the Netherlands. Ashalata has answered Surili Avantika. They're saying thank you for an informative and interesting, excellent lecture. Supreme Namaste to all brothers and sisters.
Thank you.
Artiji, please go ahead.
Namaste, Karuna. Thank you. Namaste, Vishwas. Thank you very much for a very informative talk. I think a lot of us have learned quite a bit this evening from you. Just to answer Prof. Brij Maharaj's question as to what the Arya Samaj is planning to do, we are having a Mahayajna in October, and the theme is centered around climate justice, and also the yajna and its benefits. And we're looking at mantras taken from the Vedas that pertain to climate justice. So just to answer your question, Bridge, we are looking at doing that, and we've set a date already. It's the 5th of October. Thank you.
Wow, amazing.
Okay, that would be the start. I see Ujala, is stirring some trouble also. So Ujala, do you want to share your comment, or should I read it out?
No, thank you, Karuna. I don't want to stir any trouble. I'm just thinking, I was listening in,
Yes.
that it's important that the Arya Samaj as a national organization starts engaging with the institutions or organizations that are working in this space. We all have opinions, we all have affiliations, but when it comes to an Arya Samaj collaboration, we have to be very careful. With whom are we collaborating? And when we look at the issue of climate justice and what Vish has been speaking about, we should be, I think, very clear as to where and with whom we are wanting to collaborate. And I think it's important to add to the work that is being done by the climate justice charter movement. That is all that I wanted to say around Vish sharing some of that information.
Sure. Vish, I think the Climate Justice Charter Movement has meetings, and the Arya Samaj is always invited to it. I'm not too sure if anybody else attends, but I generally attend most of the meetings you have. But I think the more important thing would be to share the list of the organizations locally in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, in Durban, in Pietermaritzburg, so they could be, the solidarity and unity built up between like-minded organizations that are working in the same field.
Can I respond to some of these
Sure,
things?
please go ahead.
So there's about 287 organizations that have endorsed the Climate Justice Charter in the country, including the APS when we took it to Parliament. And we're growing that base. But the challenge is translating that into active, if you like, endorsees of the Charter. So young activists, I mean, there's way younger people than me leading these policy development processes. And there's some amazing ideas and thinking they've done. And we want to be able to test these things in communities, in workplaces, etc. So there's space for active collaboration, like on food and building whole, adaptive food systems in communities. There's amazing collaborations that could happen with the Arya Samaj, for instance, around this, okay? This idea of the climate emergency social contract, it's a big proposition for South African society. We are a polarized society. The state has failed us in more ways than one. I hear what Bridge is saying about them wanting to listen and so on. But we are beyond token dialogue, and we are beyond just invited spaces, etc. We do need, as he said, we need to be a bit more affirmative about the direction that society needs to go in. So there is this national dialogue process, that many political foundations and so on are kind of trying to choreograph. We are trying to position in there, and we went to one of the civil society meetings. None of them in there are serious about the climate crisis. They see it as an environmental problem. We don't see it as an environmental problem. We see it as a problem of inequality. We see it as a problem of hunger. We see it as a problem of unemployment. So it'll be amazing if the Arya Samaj works very closely with us, like many others, so that we can shape all these processes together. So I'm saying here tonight, Karuna, work with us to dynamize those 287 organizations. There's a lot of work that has been done, but let's bring that work closer into each other's spaces so we can refine it further. We can figure things out together and do some bottom-up work. The other point is this. You see, I'm not a fan of green parties. Green parties have brought a particular version of modernizing ecology into the West. And yes, they've had some impacts on those societies. But Green parties, even, you know, the first Green Party that had some success was the German Green Party. It actually lost a lot of ground, particularly in this moment when climate extremes are getting more accentuated, when the multilateral process is failing, etc. Many young people voted for it, not in the last election, in the previous one. And they were let down by it. It made too many compromises. So that is why we are talking about a post-normal politics, ladies and gentlemen. The climate problem cannot even be solved by a single party. We've got to mobilize all of society, all of society. This is the key. This is the key. We've got to build alliances at the next level in our communities, whether it's community neighborhood organizations, forums, civic organizations, etc. We've got to start building that from that level up to a macro scale. And that's the mass power we need to bring to bear. Change begins from below, by the way. If we want to have deep-rooted transformation to tackle the real causes, we've got to start working in our communities. We've got to get water systems adapted right there. And already the state is failing, but we can push back, we can step in and turn that into an opportunity and claim our rights and claim a co-governance, say, for instance, on water. We can do way more around food systems from below, etc. This is going to be the politics that will educate society, that will empower society, that will give society the capacity to solve these problems. I must say this, I flashed the one slide about collapse, okay? This is a very serious thing, ladies and gentlemen. If we are facing a 1.5 degrees Celsius overshoot within the next decade, and it's going to impact deleteriously, dangerously on our food and water systems, and our ruling elites are just behind the curve. They're not about taking this risk seriously. We have to mobilize society. That's the key. That's the crux. And how that impacts the state, the logic of that will come from mass power. Listen, climate science has failed us, and I'm not saying because it's bad science. It's because they've done the best science, but policymakers and politicians are locked into and captured by other interests. Political ruling elites have failed us. They have not taken this problem seriously for 3 decades or more, okay? Symbolic activism has failed us. And we've seen a lot of this over the past 3 decades. It hasn't shifted the dial. It hasn't shifted things in societies. We have one last chance, and the stakes are so high. Let's give it our best. Let's bring out our best, and let's galvanize a new mass politics. And I believe that's what South Africa needs now more than ever before, even to defend its constitution. I agree with Bridge. I also agree with Bridge around interfaith, and I'm glad that there's momentum in the Arya Samaj with the October conference. I think his proposal should be embraced. We should definitely work for an interfaith conference for climate justice, and we'd be happy to support. We have a network of some of the best climate scientists in the country. I had lunch with one of them yesterday, and a network of others, leading activists working on this. So we can easily bring this capacity. We can bring our work on policy and so on into such a conference and have some of the deep dialogues. So again, not because we have all the answers, but we can work together to refine things, figure things out more, and have a very clear platform. Again, a platform that we are constantly championing from below. We mustn't become a lobby group where we hand over the initiative to very corrupt elites. It'll be a dead end for us. We need to own the initiative. We need to own the process. We need to lead the process. Thanks.
Thank you. Shamin, we actually passed time, so I'm going to actually suggest that we take it offline with you. Vish, I'd like to just add one thing, that while the issue is about getting everybody together, to work together, to collaborate, and to engage in projects, this is about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. And that would be the important thing in terms of ensuring global outreach also. And because we've had people from other parts of the world joining us in this seminar, it's important that, you know, we reach out to other Arya Samaj affiliates.
Before closing, may I just say a few words?
Sure. Can you identify yourself, sir?
My name is Dharamveer, living in Holland. You can see my name there as Grayson.
Go ahead.
I am living in Europe. My name is Dharamveer. I would like to say that the people of this world are misusing all the process, the world resource. Unless that can ever come to a minimal, then there will be betterment in the world. We have to get everybody to understand that climate change is a very a source of everybody joining hands to bring an end to climate change, because people are misusing the resource of the world. There is many things food is being thrown away, house materials being thrown away, everything has been thrown away. If they bought one thing every 2 years, they got to change their house, and they have to change the meubles in the house, and they want to do all kinds of things. Unless we can able to get the people to understand that that is not necessary, only then and there change can come in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, with that, I'd like to bring an end to this lecture. We have gone a bit over time this time. Thank you very much, Vish, for making the time. We know you're quite a busy person. I'd like to ask Shireen to please come on and close the meeting. Before she does that, our next lecture is going to be on the 18th of June. It's on Wednesday, the 18th of June at the same time. And we would be graced with the presence of yet another professor, Professor Ashwin Desai. Thank you. Shireen, over to you.
Namaste. We would end today's lecture, very, very informative, I must say, with the Shanti path, which is most poignant, absolutely poignant. Om Dhyo Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantir Apah Shantir Oshadhaya Shanti Vanaspatya Shantir Vishve Devaha Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantirevi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste and Dhanyavad.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night, Vish. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vish.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Bhaji.
Namaste.
Hi, namaste to everyone.
Namaste, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste, Bhayo.